Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic show. It's our roundtable show. This is episode 392. We do this every Friday at around 8:30 Pacific Standard Time, and you can watch us live on the WP-Tonic Facebook page and comment on what we're commenting on. I always love reading your comments, listeners and viewers. So we've got a powerful panel. I think it's going to be an interesting discussion. We've got a special guest, Jason. Jason, would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Sure. I'm Jason Schuller. I have a long history with WordPress going back to 2007, having built one of the first premium WordPress theme shops, which I sold in 2014, and just keep playing with WordPress ever since and growing businesses on it. So.
Oh, and thank you for agreeing to come on the show.
Yeah.
Have you got strong opinions, Jason?
When it comes to WordPress, I do, yeah.
Oh,
He'll fit right in.
You fit right in. And I've got Matt from the Matt Report. Matt, would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Hey, Matt from the Matt Report.
Your fame exceeds you.
Oh, God. Sally, would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly, I'm Sally Getch,
yeah.
the WP fangirl. And I also am the organizer of the East Bay WordPress meetup in Oakland, California. And we're still filling in speakers for the coming year. So if you live in the Bay Area or expect to visit here and have a WordPress topic you'd like to share with us, let me know.
And I've got Spencer. Spencer, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Spencer Foreman from WPLaunchify.com.
And I've got my friend John. John, would you like to introduce yourself?
John Locke from Lockdown Design and SEO.
Right, you need to bung your volume up a little bit, John.
It's probably my microphone.
Yeah. Right. Oh, that was interesting, Sad. That was very interesting. All right, on to the first story. WP-Campus released results on the GUTENBERG accessibility audit. Right, Matt, what did you think of this one?
Of course, you came to me first.
Of course.
I was feverishly going through this 34-page executive summary. I honestly don't have too much to share because I haven't absorbed all of this stuff. I just quickly went down to the page 27, 28, 30, somewhere in the middle, right here in the middle, 25. And immediately just looked at the issues by severity, when 51% of the issues found are labeled medium. So, I mean, I don't know. I guess it's the half glass full, half glass empty kind of thing, but it just seems like there's a lot of problems still. Medium is pretty important, I would say. Certainly not low with 18% high. So still, I guess, lots of work to do. I want to definitely dive through this report in detail more after this.
What did you reckon, Jason?
Well, it's just interesting to me that how quickly Gutenberg has become almost an industry standard right out of the gate without even having been, gone through these checks and double checks. I was on a contract just a couple months ago for a massive organization, and even with all the issues still with Gutenberg, it was their go forward. It was we're not doing this unless it's Gutenberg. So it's one of those WordPress things, right? It's become industry standard, even without having gone through these checks, and it seems to be pushing through, regardless of all the bad news that it gets. So.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's a little bit outside. I've got another little business that's in the real estate industry, and it's website, and there's a number of very large real estate related websites that are public facing are being sued at the present moment for accessibility problems.
Right.
Basically, there's about 3 major websites in the real estate industry that are facing, they are actively being sued, and it's going through the courts at the present moment. So it is interesting. What do you reckon, Sally?
I reckon it's a pity that we don't have Morton here with us, but the fact that the executive summary is 34 pages, and the report is more than 300, does help to explain why a thorough accessibility test costs $30,000, and that it was a non-trivial investment. But the findings really show that, we needed to do this because we need to know it's there before we can fix it.
Right.
I don't doubt that, most, if not all of this will eventually be addressed. But those can be some fairly serious considerations if you are, a university or a government office or somebody where you are really required to have your website accessible on both sides, to create it as well as to view it. And so, I'm glad this has been done now, even if it wasn't done before, and it can help, it should help people improve things.
Yeah, what do you reckon, Spencer? Do you think there could be an issue with the code that it actually spews out not being accessible? But you could say that a lot about all these page builders or anybody that hasn't got...
Have you looked at the code that Gutenberg produces on the front end?
No, I haven't.
It's very clean.
Oh, good.
It's very clean. You don't see all those funny HTML comments because they're comments, and you just see this nice, neat HTML without like 5,000 extra divs.
Oh, great. What do you reckon, Spencer?
I'm pleasantly surprised that there wasn't a 4-page summary of this report produced by Otto presented to the public, but rather we got the full 300. Which was nice.
Oh, it'll be nice to Otto. I'm going to have to get him on the show. We're nasty to him.
Life not imitating art. But insofar as Gutenberg is concerned, I think Jason hits the nail on the head that this was a hop on the train or don't situation for just about everybody. And the problem that I see, aside from the actual people with disabilities on the front end that need the accessibility, is on the user experience, even for regular people, I still find that the back end is a bit shocking. I feel the capacity is there, but when I go to that page, I feel like when I first handed my mom a remote control from Comcast that had 180 buttons, and I'm like, where's the revision thing again? It's over there. They took something that you knew where everything was, and they just jumbled it up and just threw it randomly anywhere. And I think that the accessibility for me has, personally, and my clients, more to do with the user backend experience as much as it does with whether you can see the fonts and so forth. So I believe that will be fixed, but I think that's part of the, you got on the train and you realized they didn't bring any food and water for the passengers, so it's going to be a long trip until we get to the next station.
It is interesting on the back end, even for folks who aren't, have accessibility issues with reading the screen and finding buttons. I mean, Gutenberg hides a lot of functionality via hover states. And so a lot of
those hover buttons.
Yeah, those hover buttons. So they're completely invisible almost to the naked eye before you actually move your cursor and hover over them to edit something.
I want to mention something about that, because as a codgety old 52-year-old who has teenage kids, I appreciate how things like Snapchat.
Right, we're just going to rename this the Get Off My Lawn roundtable.
You would have gotten away with it too. The gestures, the hidden gesture concept from mobile devices that seems pervasive, for younger people, they just intuitively get it because they heard about it in school. But the idea that everything is not patently obvious.
It's not intuitive if they get it because they heard about it or saw someone do it.
My point is, living in the cave by myself here, if it doesn't exist in an open way, or it's not clear that there's a parent menu, I just grew up in the Braille school of web use, where the idea that I have to press a cogwheel to open a window and then snap down and move my page to the left to see the thing that used to be obvious is part of where the frustration to me. And there is a quote in here. It said Gutenberg's user experience is consistently poor. I think that would be a fair way to phrase what I feel about it, which is it's slowing me down significantly more than it probably could be if somebody spent a weekend just reorganizing the menu layout to be more obvious.
What do you reckon, John?
I'm going to tell a story really quick. The first WordCamp I ever went to was San Francisco 2014. And one of the talks that really stood out to me was a talk by Joe O'Connor, AKA Accessible Joe. And at that time, WordPress, he highlighted how it was being used by people with motor disabilities and cognitive disabilities, people who were blind, who were blogging, people who couldn't type. Or could only access a keyboard very slowly. We're using WordPress to, actually democratize publishing. And I think it's a little sad for me to see how accessibility was an afterthought in this. Hopefully they, as Gutenberg goes forward and value is increased for shareholders, that it will be brought more to the forefront. Because as Sally mentioned, there are a lot of organizations in the enterprise, in government, in education that cannot use a CMS that is not accessible. So hopefully it becomes more of a priority.
Oh, that's great. Right, on to the next story. Creative Commons launches a search engine out of beta with over 300 million image indexed. It almost took as long as Gutenberg, though, almost 2 years. There we go.
Well, the beta one has been around for a while, but yes, now we just need to give it some publicity because there are a terrifying number of people out there who still think it's perfectly fine to use any image you find anywhere on the internet for anything.
Well, Google thinks that way, doesn't it?
Yes, but I had a client who's a young, naive intern. Got them hit up with an $800 fine by Getty Images.
Oh, it's been years since I got one of those nice letters. I look forward, whenever you do a project and you get a Getty letter. It's just fantastic, isn't it? What do you reckon, Matt? What do you reckon about this one?
I can't wait for a plugin to integrate this into posting. Maybe a Gutenberg block.
Of course. It's a great opportunity, isn't it, Matt?
Start building it now.
There's one called Instant Images that I use quite often.
Is it?
I think
it's
there
not for
might be
this.
an Unsplash one.
Yeah,
that's
like that.
Yeah, the Unsplash Instant Images pulls from Unsplash. I don't know if it pulls from anything else. That's pretty cool. I like it. It's fun. That's what I got.
All right, there we go. Here's the man a few words. Right, there we go. Jason, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think the popularity of Unsplash, speaks for itself, and the Creative Commons search engine will do the same for folks who want maybe not so professionalized images, I guess.
That's very diplomatic. I'm really impressed with that, Jason.
Yeah,
God, you're going to have to come back on the show. You're showing levels. Oh, Chris, but you're showing levels of diplomacy like Chris.
Oh gosh. Somebody made a wonderful comment I heard on a TED Talk podcast the other day about stock photos of women jumping in heels.
Yeah, I just can't see using all the images of cats, right? I'm on a professional site that I'm going to be in front of
for your clients.
Can't be good pictures of cats, Jason.
For them to actually hire photographers and take pictures of their actual people doing their actual jobs.
Right.
But for a lot of people, I think it is useful, and it's helpful if you want things to use as placeholders, if you've got a personal blog.
Yeah, the search term computer on this search engine versus Unsplash has some pretty stark differences in quality.
Say the least. Yeah, but it always makes me laugh when you talk to a client and they're saying, "Oh, I'm going to have to actually buy photos. I can't just take them off the internet," which I can't blame them, because let's face it, it's been the business, one of the main business models of Google since the beginning of it. Rip off other people's copyright and give it to other people for free, really, isn't it? But then you got the Getty. you got the other extreme, you know, those cockroaches Getty, you know, that made a business model of suing people, you know, they're lovely people.
Yes, although even the Getty does provide a fair number of images free. There's a ton of images from museums that are available to use for free.
Would you really use anything from Getty? Because I don't know. Well, obviously,
I mostly don't spend that much when I buy stock photos. Thank you very much. But I would completely, you know, use some of their images of their museum collections for personal use.
Right. What do you reckon?
I'm a museum junkie.
Oh, there we go, John. What do you reckon?
No, I think this is great. I think there is confusion sometimes. I haven't had clients like recently that have had this kind of notion that you can just grab any image off the internet and use it. Most of the time I handle that on our end. To answer your question, Jonathan, yes. Occasionally I will use Getty Images or iStock. It's good for single projects to just get a package for a month and get some different images than the ones on Pexels and Unsplash and Stock Snap. But yeah.
There you go. What do you reckon, Uncle Spencer? What do you reckon?
I mean, Creative Commons serves a great purpose, but I would think, you know, Jason said it really well. It's like, I can't conceive of a situation other than as a placeholder for somebody or to demonstrate what not to do photographically that anybody would use any of these images for any purpose. Even the search capabilities, I mean, I just typed my own name and it came up with like an extraordinary non-match. Whereas if you go to one of the sites that has a vested interest in the quality of the images, I particularly like Unsplash and Pexels. You get stuff that's really usable. And although some of it is overdone because you see it 8 billion places, there's plenty of stuff out there that makes it commercially reasonable to use any of those. So this is just an enigma. This is like looking at the Wayback Machine as far as I'm concerned, or, you know, for amusement. But I can't imagine why the search engine has much of an effect for, you know, business purposes.
Right, on to the next story. An analysis of 18,087 WordPress plugins. What did you reckon about this one, John?
You're going to put me on the spot. I didn't read this one. Can I ask for a minute? Yeah.
You get a B- for that. Let's hope my guest was more. Did you read this, beloved guest, Jason?
I'm going to have to pass on this one too. I didn't get to this one.
All right. All right. Did anybody read this? Or yeah, good. All right.
Yes. Well, point number one: it isn't an analysis.
No, it isn't.
Any conclusions? What it is we have collected a bunch of data on these plugins. We have not sat down to think about what, if anything, it means. So it's sort of like, well, we now have some information from which the rest of us could make some analyses, which may be useful.
Well, I'd like to defend myself. The reason, obviously, it was a plug. You know, he was doing some research to find out, you know, what plugin he should build first. But then he passed on some comments that we've been consistently saying about, you know, to actually find something in the plugin, you know, library, depository, whatever you want to call it, isn't that particularly fantastic, and that's been ongoing.
Yeah, well, it probably still uses WordPress search. That might be why.
Exactly. I just wondered why they don't bloody sort it out, for God's sake, a bit. What do you reckon, Spencer?
It's because, you know, certain people that Spencer is dearly fond of are
it's Otto, isn't it? It's Otto again. He just won't do it, will he?
You know, what this reveals to me, first of all, hats off to the author who did this, because this demonstrates something that we used to do in the old days when you could only get to a platform through a rudimentary API. That is, that it is apparently possible to scrape the data, which I think opens up the possibility that somebody who has, let's say, not necessarily plugin authoring interests in mind, but has other kinds of services related to this, could make a business out of. coming to mind is like Built With, which is a company that just scrapes all the websites in the world and then comes up with information that is bought by businesses who need to know. I need leads about who uses bbPress and so forth. So the idea that this can be scraped is intriguing to my sort of entrepreneurial, back of my mind idea. The second thing is, I think it's evidence for the bet that I still have on the table for 2019, which is that there is a trend of WordPress is a platform for building essentially, e-commerce, membership, marketing automation sites. And if you look at all the plugins, there's a pattern there, which is the plugins are all related essentially to those things or to making those things better. And even the accessory plugins that are in there, things like limit login attempts, are essentially related to limitations of the current WordPress core that probably could be.
Isn't the entire point of plugins that they overcome?
The difference I'm saying is if you were looking at a meal at a restaurant, okay, and they said to you, here's your meal, right? It's got an entree pre-cooked, it's got a side, it's got a dessert, it's like, here, buy the meal. If they said to you, well, we'll just bring you a cart of groceries that you can just put everything together yourself, it's not a restaurant experience. I'm saying that for most users of WordPress, we're reaching the point where they really don't need or want to browse through 185,000 plugins to figure out what to use. They just want, which is the thing to do here? And if WordPress or Automatic was seriously looking at this, as maybe other entrepreneurs are, I think that's ultimately the way that this thing moves into the next century. Squarespace has an open market where people can sell their tchotchkes and services, but they're all for sale. WordPress has a sort of free or buy our thing, but yet I think people really still want that experience like Squarespace, where most of the stuff is here, and then I know somebody is going to, do the thing for me. The second takeaway was that when you look at some of these, or maybe the third, some of these are amusing to me. For example, although I think Gutenberg is here to stay, we've all gotten on that train. Gutenberg, 200,000 active installations. Disable Gutenberg, 200,000 active installations.
Well, yes, except that these days you would only have Gutenberg activated if you wanted the beta features, since the Gutenberg
it's sort of like
yes.
Vasectomy, undo your vasectomy. I mean, which one is it?
Well, yeah, exactly, Matt. Which one is it?
Well, thanks for transitioning me after that one.
Yes, I think Matt might be blushing.
Yeah. So no, I mean the author actually sent me this before he finished it. I've talked to him before in the past. He's written some pretty good articles, and it's not he doesn't draw a conclusion. It's just a thought piece is the way that I look at it. A lot of interesting information. I think it started for him anyway about like how big software is getting, like in terms of storing software on a server, how big these plugin files are getting, that kind of thing. And it was quite telling to just see how big the ecosystem is, but how big plugins are getting and all that fun stuff. It's good information. It's good food for thought. It's crazy to see, like, you draw the correlations between like Elementor in terms of like plugins with the highest ratings, but also plugins with the most open issues or open support threads. 381 compared to the next one that's 115. So it's, nearly doubling that support. A lot of interesting just factoids in here, but I agree with Spencer that I don't think we'll ever see a true marketplace on WordPress.org. I think what we're seeing it is through Gutenberg, and it's going to be a marketplace just for Automatic, where, when you launch a page, it's going to be like, hey, don't forget this premium block that you can slide in. And if you want this premium block, you activate Jetpack Premium, whatever. I agree with Spencer. I think we're moving in a direction where in about 2 years' time, when you go to WordPress.org, it's going to be download open source WordPress, try this free version of WordPress powered by Jetpack, and then buy this premium version of WordPress.
Yeah, it was interesting having been in the theme business, and being in the theme business since 2007. There was this massive shift of, the theme sold you on what the theme did, and plugins were kind of superfluous on the side if you wanted to add a little bit of functionality. But there was this shift, I want to say, around 2010-ish, where themes became a little less important and plugins started kind of rising in the ranks of being the thing to build your business on WordPress. And definitely through 2014, when I sold my theme business, I mean, plugins were the thing to do. If you wanted to build a business on WordPress and sell something on WordPress, it was via plugin, not via theme anymore. And so it seems only natural to me that this is kind of taking place, this massive hype over plugins and Gutenberg blocks. It's definitely the future of WordPress, I think.
And there's a shortage of good themes.
Right.
And I think the issue, especially back around the time that you cited, to, again, earmark Spencer's favorite person in the world, getting themes through around that time, and maybe even still today, I was doing themes back then, and it was extremely difficult to get themes through the review process. And you get these random reasons why your name is too vague, denied, and then it's like back to the bottom of the list, wait for 3,000 people to clear through, and you're just like, man, I'm just here to pick up a pound of turkey and some American cheese. Like, I'm just sitting here with my ticket trying to get through.
Yeah.
Your sound's breaking up a little bit, Matt. I think it's a bit like you've got loose USB cables. I think. Right. What did you reckon, John?
Right. So a couple of things that were interesting. This is all the plugins that were released in the last 36 months, so the last 3 years. As was pointed out, the Classic Editor plugin is the most popular. But I noticed a lot of Elementor plugins. Elementor itself is number 2. And then there's some add-ons for Elementor that are insanely popular on this list. So I think that kind of tells something about maybe Gutenberg should copy Elementor, because people seem to be finding that useful to them. The only other stat that really jumps out at me is almost 20% of these plugins have never been updated. So of all the plugins, the most popular plugins released in the last 3 years, 1/5 of them have never been updated. That's a little troubling.
Yeah, and then you've had this spate of security issues that kind of rears its head periodically. That's been prevalent over the past couple months, and then that seems to come and go, doesn't it, John?
Right. I mean, and if you look back, 4 or 5 years, it wasn't pipdig or, mining Bitcoin on your server. It was a Revolution Slider with their, vulnerability that they didn't disclose for 8 months. So
yeah, it was
let's not talk about Tim Thumb and all of those.
Tim Thumb. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Themes on Theme Forest.
Yeah, I hoped we had moved away, but that kind of seems to have... But it was a kind of different...
Security is a perpetual issue when you write code, And
yeah, but it's a kind of different taste, isn't it? It was more... I'm looking for the right word, more devious this time than last time, really, wasn't it? When actually people...
Well, in most cases, people don't put insecure code out deliberately.
No, it was... Am I right about that, Matt? It was a slightly different flavour of devious.
You mean the recent issue?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's slightly different, but...
No. You can say I'm talking shit if you want to, Matt.
Yeah, don't hold back.
Yeah.
We're friends here, Matt. You can say, "Oh, that was crap." Right, let's go. Let's go for our break, and when we come back, I've got a couple of good stories. I think they're good stories. On a quiet week, listeners and viewers, I tried to find stuff that was entertaining. We'll be back in a few moments, folks. We're coming back. Matt's trying to find another cable because you're still buzzing away, Matt, a little bit.
Is it a constant buzz? Is that what we have?
It's static.
Yeah.
It's static.
Staticky buzz.
Buzz. We're coming back, folks. But before we go into our next couple of great stories, I like to mention one of my great sponsors of the show, and that would be WP Fusion. What is WP Fusion? Well, in your technology stack, obviously you've got WordPress, or you should have WordPress, but it's 2019, folks, so you're into marketing automation, and that's with all your great CRMs like ActiveCampaign, Drip. There's a whole host of them. And what WP Fusion does, it allows WordPress with your CRM to communicate flawlessly. And if you've got a membership site, a learning management system, WooCommerce, anything that you're consistently having to market, updates, upgrades, whatever you wish, WP Fusion is the tool for you. If you're a developer, Power Client, go to WP Fusion. And the other great news is, as exclusively for WP-Tonic, you're going to get 25%. So if you use this coupon code WP-Tonic, all uppercase, you'll get 25% of any of WP Fusion's packages. And that's only offered to you, listeners and viewers. We've got Matt's heart rate going. He's scrambling around trying to find something, but hopefully he will succeed. He was sounding a bit garlicky. So on to the next story. Are podcasts killing music or just wasting our time? Well, it's wasting enough of my bloody time, I can tell you that there. Did you manage to read this one, Jason, at all?
Yeah, I read this. I'm a big podcast guy, so.
Oh, thank you, Jason.
My own personal.
Do you listen to my podcast?
I don't listen to podcasts that have anything to do with the industry I'm in. Interestingly enough,
that's so tactful. Tactful. Right.
And, you just kind of get burnt out sometimes on listening to things that are in relation to what you do for a living. So I try to subscribe to things that are, I don't know, mostly educational, but sometimes entertaining. I don't think that podcasts are killing music. I think that podcasts are bringing people back to a time where, there wasn't television, and there was this moment where you would sit around the speaker and there was this voice coming through, and you can use your imagination a little bit more. And there's something to a podcast that kind of elevates you on that level. And for me, especially, I feel like I can consume these podcasts in little bits throughout the day in places where maybe I used to listen to music, but now I'm kind of filling that time with podcasts because I feel like it's adding a little bit more value to my life on the day-to-day, I guess. So like even when I'm running or exercising, I'm usually listening to a podcast versus music these days. So I guess in that way, maybe it is killing music.
It all sounds very healthy in Seattle. All this running and bicycling, and it's all very healthy sounding. There we go. Sally, what you said.
I think this is kind of it's an interesting take, because pretty much everything that he says it could be applied equally to talk radio. It's sort of like, well, look, if listening to music is what you really like to do, you're probably going to listen to music. And maybe it will be Spotify or Pandora instead of your CD collection or the radio that's coming over the airwaves. Calling it terrestrial just seems wrong somehow.
There's a few people that say I'm terrestrial.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I may be extraterrestrial, but and no one's revealed it to me. But in any case,
where's the cat?
Like, if you. I'm sitting in the sun.
We need to liven this up. Matt's getting restless and bored. And
yes,
Jason's got that look. What the hell am I doing here?
I'm not sure why AD.
Desperate as a broadcaster, you need kids or cats, mate.
Seriously, I think if what you want to listen to is talk of some kind, you're going to listen to it, and it might have been the AM radio stations, before we had podcasts or satellite radio or any of those things. So, before podcasts became available, I was mostly listening to audio tapes from the teaching company. And I just think it's a different kind of thing. Like when you want to listen to music, you listen to music. Now, are there a bunch of crappy, dull podcasts out there? Sure. There's a bunch of that everywhere. But it just seems like he's setting up a straw figure to knock down.
Well, it's really interesting, really, about alternative media, because I kind of also link it to the growth of YouTube branding, on the political, sorry to introduce politics, folks, I apologise, but on the progressive side of politics, you've got Jimmy Dole, you've got the Young Turks, and the same thing on the right side of the political spectrum. You've got, people building up brands and loyalty in alternative media, and that seems to be, the traction seems to be taken off to some extent. What do you reckon, John?
Sorry, Ed, unmute. I think the author is talking about podcasting here, and saying that you're building stuff out of sounds, and a lot of podcasts are almost like the smooth jazz equivalent of a sonic presentation. Speaking of what, some people have said previously here, podcasting is not really a type of broadcast, but it's a platform for doing all different types of things. So it could be talk shows like what this is. It could be entertainment, like something like This American Life, or Serial, or something like that. But there's all different ways in which to approach it. And I think it is kind of the modern radio. That's really where it comes from. The author mentions a piece in here called Ways of Hearing. I'd like to check that out some more, because that sounds pretty interesting. I don't think podcasts are killing music. I think they're two separate types of things.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm used to the BBC, Jack and Nori, and Woman's Hour. I'm on Radio 4. I always used to listen to Woman's Hour. There we go. So, Matt, you've been kind of mixing your podcasting with a lot of video. First of all, you've been getting into video a lot more, but also doing your podcasting. Do you think you can mix the both up successfully, or,
No.
No. No. That's all you're going to say.
No hesitation.
No, right.
Yeah. No. So on this article side, I'm seeing a lot more people on friends that I know on Facebook who have never listened to podcasts before, now finally getting into podcasts, which I think is maybe a little bit of what this article has to do with it. And I like that. I mean, obviously as a podcaster, it's interesting to see. But I've been spending my time creating a local podcast as well, like a local entrepreneurship podcast for my area. And I've seen that grow, much faster and have a lot more impact in the short amount of its lifetime than, my traditional podcasting, or even spending time on YouTube kind of thing. So that is kind of exciting that people do want this kind of content, and they're finally getting what a podcast is. You might as well have said RSS feed to them like 3 years ago. They'd be like, I have no idea.
Yeah, I've got to tell you, I'm thinking, because I get most of my income from not my local area now, I'm thinking of it's payback time. I'm going to do a Facebook political show about Nevada politics. I'll probably get assassinated if I do it, actually. But because I know some dirt.
Crucified.
I know where the dirt is. See, so
we need you here. You don't
really believe that, Matt, do you? So there we go. Spencer, what did you think?
I'm really surprised. I mean, I think it's tongue in cheek, but I'm really surprised that anybody is concerned that there's a competition between music and podcasts, considering there's about 800 trillion things to consume at any one moment. I think my biggest issue is the old, 8 million things and nothing is on, just bouncing around. I will say one thing, the thing I'm going to share is my, tip of the day is this coughativity. I will say that for me, that I've found, whether it be the podcasts or talk shows or music, that there's certain things that will or will not allow me to work. So I can't listen to some kinds of music that I prefer when I'm bike riding, whereas I can do them while I'm working. And that's something that to me is the useful reason. Even if a podcast has good content, sometimes it's just very soothing to hear people's voices in the background, not really listening to what they're saying.
Is my voice soothing, Spencer?
I think if I had a pillow and a blanket, there are some shows, maybe like today, that I could take a nap.
I think Matt finds it soothing because he just thinks the rest of the time he's going to go to sleep when he joins us. But there we go.
Shows are for exercise and some shows are for napping. But whichever one you choose, the point
I think my show's definitely for napping, isn't it?
I only want to make a side comment, which has nothing to do with the content. It has to do with, I think one of the things I'm noticing, and maybe you guys agree, when it comes to the web pages and it comes to podcasts in particular, not so much with music. We've accepted that with the music, you're going to pay somebody to get the music, right? I mean, I finally gave into YouTube, whatever, and I had Spotify and all these other stuff. I accept that. But now in the podcast realm, there are certain podcasters, I will not name their names, but you probably know them yourself, where they are so horrible at doing their ads and the way they do it that it almost destroys your ability to listen to the show. It's either at the wrong place, the wrong time, it's too clunky, they're trying to be something.
So basically you're saying their podcasts are like pretty much every single news site on the planet?
Well, look at the news, but different, because here's why. Like with the professional news site, you just know they're going to jam the commercial block in and it's like, go to the bathroom or go get something. It's just when podcasters do it, there's no really definitive rule yet. So some of them do it very gracefully.
Oh, I meant trying to read anything on a website.
Yeah, I mean, of course, but like
putting it back to the top so you can see the flipping ad, and it's like, no, bye.
Well, if you look at, for example, I appreciate, although I don't necessarily enjoy their content as much, but like Tim Ferriss, at least, Tim Ferriss has 9 minutes of commercials at the beginning of a show. So you just hit the button 22 times before you get on your bike, and you know the rest of it is good. Andrew Warner, who I appreciate his content, is still struggling to figure out what the hell to do. And it's random, and he tries to make it into some kind of colloquial thing, and I've emailed him directly. I'm like, just knock it off. Just do the commercial.
What do you think about building a website? Would you build it on HostGator? And he'd be like, no. Like, no.
Let's talk.
I almost got him on the show, actually. I was talking to Spencer gave me the name of a producer, and was having a conversation, and then he said, he's going to Europe. So I took that as a no, he's not coming on your show.
Well, you see on the websites with, like, for example, the web pages thing, sometimes I use Apple News, and it has good stories that refer you to a website like the Washington Post or something. What I find disturbing today is they haven't figured their shit out either, because we're seeing it even now. I use ad blocker, but like, I'm not going to pay the Washington Post $1 to read your janky article, when if I wanted to know that, I'll just copy the title and it's free. Like, just knock it off. If you can't aggregate it as to something that's part of my subscription.
Haven't got a billionaire that bought their paper, have they? You know, I'm
happy to pay you the money, but make the payment predictable. It's like nobody's dropping nickels and quarters. That idea came and went. It's just, those are the things I notice about the consumption part of this, which is to say, I think we're living in a world of abundance of content because there's no barriers to production. Anybody could be a professional producer of.
Well, I'll put enough shit up on iTunes. There we go. So there we go. On to the next one. Oh, the cat's appeared. Come on. We'll get the show back. The Nutseed Jason, the numbers increase tremendously when we have cats on the show. On to the next one. We've got time. Yeah, we've got time. It's a story from Brian Jackson. Yes, I know they sponsor the show, but he just writes good stuff, Brian. And he's a friend of the show. And it's B2 versus B2C marketing. Understanding the differences is key. I love this article. What did you think of it, Matt? Please say you read it. No, you didn't, did you?
I don't read anything from a hosting company that starts with K. It was good. You wanted me to be real. No, it's good. It was a good piece. Yeah, it makes sense. B2B, B2C, differences outlined, infographics. What more could you ask for?
You've been awful today. You've been naughty, but God God bless you. You are the king of WordPress podcasting. So there we go. You naughty man.
Well, you do know something about selling, whether or not.
That's what I was asking. That's what I was asking you first. Oh, well, you're not going to contribute. Right, there you go. Salt, if you like. Spencer, what did you think of this one?
You get a lot of articles from Kinsta. I know Brian's a good guy, but like we have a lot of articles. That's my comment is like every show has got a Kinsta article, so I know where you're starting.
Not every bloody show.
And there's nothing wrong with this article, but the only takeaway, you can just go right to the bottom, and I have an opinion, which is he's factually correct, but I say, who cares? Because in my mind, the difference in the WordPress ecosystem between B2B and B2C is, are you selling to somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, or are you selling to somebody that's running a business? They're both B2C at some point, which is he's agreeing with, but it's not like a traditional sales cycle. And I don't know anybody that's taking a year to figure out whether or not the client's project's going to go ahead. I mean, the sales cycle on this is like this long or this long. And ta-da! I mean, so I don't know.
I like to defend myself. It was a weak story week, but the reason why I chose, because this idea that they look at all the facts and the return and that, I agree with Brian was saying that half of it's still emotional. It's still if they really feel a relationship with
all relationships. Everything is relationships.
Yeah, even not to mention the part that's political, which you aren't necessarily, is the internal politics of who in the organization wants this service provider versus that service provider.
Yeah, I'm dealing with that. I'm dealing with that at the present moment, actually.
Jonathan, we work together on a project, and we both know that even when you have a corporate environment, and there's other corporate clients we've discussed, that you're dealing with a point person who then is working with you in a relationship to help you figure out what to say and how to say it so the morons above them don't make the bad decision. That's essentially the politics, which is Sally's point. And that's all relationships all the time, because life and business are the same. It's just about relationships. The idea of sales cycle and blah, 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 that's when you've literally got a 7, 8-figure, 9-figure company selling to another company. That's different, like $10,000.
I've learned to reduce what I say as much as possible, because on reflection, someone coming to mind now. I've got a cold sweat. I don't know if old Matt agrees to this one, but I'm getting cold sweats already thinking about this. The amount of bloody deals that I've pissed up, Matt, because I kept talking and I just shut up and let them buy. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah, I mean, it happens. Sometimes you can ramble on a sales call, especially in this day and age. If you're not doing like a video conference and it's just a conference call, it's easy to fall into that. But it's you try to just be as short and sweet as possible and say, hey, that's what I got. That's the price. What do you think?
This is what I got. This is what I got. Bye. What do you reckon? What do you reckon, Jason?
I'm going to have to agree with Spencer on every point he made there. I don't think I could have said it more eloquently.
Yeah. All right, we're going to go for our products, services. Mine isn't Kinsta, by the way. It's a book, and it's called The Patterning Instinct by Jeremy Lent. It's an interesting read, actually. I listened to it on audiobook, and it's about the new society that is coming. I look forward to it, but I'll be dead before it comes. But there we go. Spencer, have you got a product or service that you'd like to tell the beloved listeners and viewers?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go with one of the things that I use when I'm in the mood to really get in the zone is Coffeetivity.com. It's a service that's free. It's a lot like things you get elsewhere, but it essentially allows you for free to choose one of 3 coffee shop environments to listen to in the background. And I don't know why. I mean, no, in all seriousness, I mean, I know friends who listen to trance music and stuff like that. And this is just like as if you had your head down in a Starbucks, and it's that chinkity chink and that murmur sound. And it just gets you in the zone. And if you're doing creative work or copywriting, it seems like that's, other than maybe some classic jazz, that's the only thing I can do, because otherwise the words from the music get in my head. So.
Yeah. I don't know what to say about that. All right. Sally, got anything to share with the listeners and viewers?
There's a train going by in the background. Can you all hear it? Yes. Thing to share number one: backups and testing them. I recently got some data retrieved from the drive that failed in November, when I found out that even though I could see file synchronizations happening every day, there was a shed load of really important stuff that was not getting backed up.
Oh dear.
And Drive Savers is amazing, but they cost bank. But a recommendation in addition to that, I have just ordered a book called Programmed Inequality: How Britain Discarded Women Technologists and Lost Its Edge in Computing. And I had to order it rather than just download it, because it doesn't come as a regular ebook. It's got lots of pictures. And I am interested in this because there was, as people probably, everybody in this room now knows, a major transition from having lots and lots and lots of women programming computers to having almost none. And this is not necessarily an improvement.
No, I totally agree with you. Jason, have you got something to share with the listeners and viewers?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've been reading this book by Paul Jarvis called Company of One, and it's kind of centric around this idea that growth maybe isn't the best idea for a lot of businesses, and how avoiding growth can actually be more durable, sustainable, and enjoyable, depending on the type of person and the type of business you're running. And it just kind of hit true for me and what I was doing with my business back in the day. And yeah, great book.
Yeah, can you put a link to it into chat for us? That's great. John, have you got something to share with the listeners and viewers?
Yeah, and I don't know if I shared this like a month ago, but I'm going to share it again, and I'm going to tell you why. My friend Tim Smith, notable designer, he is kickstarting a project called Bokeh, which is it's going to be a picture sharing app. He's looking for $10,000 for this Kickstarter to build an iOS app. But basically what it's going to be is a place where you can share your photos privately. It's an alternative to Instagram and Facebook. It's going to be $3 a month or $30 a year. I think the Kickstarter levels are $10, $20, and then $1,000 will be like a lifetime. You'll have it for the entire lifetime. But this is a project that I can get behind. It's kind of similar to Errol Balkin's indie phone that was aimed at privacy a couple of years ago. So I definitely urge you to check it out, bokeh.pics.
That's great. And Matt, have you got something for the listeners and viewers?
By the way, that does look like a great project. I am excited to see more privately owned photo sharing services. Looks very interesting. But what I have to share today is I love when Automatic builds a product other than WordPress and Jetpack. And one of the things that I've got my sights on is happy.tools. I did interview the lead developer on that episode coming out in a couple of weeks. But they're going to be really expanding that suite of tools for remote workers, remote distributed offices, and stuff like that. Right now, happy.tools is just like a way for folks to manage time across many team members and assign tasks in an eloquent way. But they're going to be expanding it pretty broadly coming soon, so keep an eye on that. I do love a good Automatic product. Like, I love Simple Note. Great product. WordPress? I'm just kidding.
It's all Otto's fault. Poor Otto. All right then. Spencer, how can people find out more about you and what you're up to?
If you're interested in membership, marketing automation, e-commerce, you want to talk to a real person for free, you can reach us at WPLaunchify.com.
Oh, that's great. Sally, how can people find out more about you and what you're up to?
I am at Sally Getch on Twitter, and you can find me at WPFangirl.com.
And our beloved guest, Jason, how can people find out more about you and what you're up to and your thoughts?
Yeah, Twitter is the best way. Jason Patrick, CKSC, Jason Patrick SC. And latest project is leaflets.com. I'm building single page websites there using WordPress as a back end, but you'll never see it on the front end, which is awesome.
All right. And what tell us more about it? What's it aimed at?
So it's aimed at single page kind of landing pages. So a lot of people who have newsletters, or maybe they're trying to do a fundraise for a product, or maybe they just want a profile for their Instagram or YouTube account. So there's a lot of use cases for just having a single page website. And so what I've done is I've taken WordPress and used it as the backend platform to build an entirely new front-end experience for creating a website. So if you go on Leaflets, you can actually create a page and manage that entire page via a custom front-end experience. And then you can publish it on your own domain. So it's kind of cool.
Oh, great. All right. John, how can people find out more about you and what you're up to?
You can find me at my website, which is Lockdown SEO. Also look for me on YouTube, hashtag Lockdown SEO, publishing videos daily.
That's great. And Matt, how can people find out more about you, your thoughts, and what you're up to?
MattReport.com and Pagely.com.
That's great. Pagely. It's fantastic, folks. Great hosting.
They are the oldest sponsor of my WordPress meetup.
Well, good. It's great. I've got nothing against Pagely. If they ever want to sponsor my show, they can always contact me. They know where to get me. They're wiser. They probably... All right, folks. It's been I think it's been a good show. We've covered a lot of territory. We'll see you next week where we have another great panel and we'll be discussing WordPress and the web in general for that week. We'll see you next week, folks. Bye.
Bye.